This is Charles Adler Tonight.
An interesting story here out of the City of Montreal. Of course, religious institutions across Canada, and for that matter, religious facilities have been tax exempt. But churches in Montreal say, so do their religious leaders, that they're becoming concerned about hosting community groups after they've been hit with bills for municipal taxes. Now, in Quebec, as is the case in many jurisdictions across Canada, provincial law exempts churches from paying taxes, but if facilities are vacant for several months, even if they're just between ministers, they're going to be taxed. For insight onto this and to get into the bigger picture, it's my pleasure to welcome to the program a representative from the Society of Edmonton Atheists. He's a politico, a secular rights activist, Luke Fevin, joining me over the phone. Luke, good evening to you.
Good evening, Ryan.
What do you make of this story out of Montreal? Something tells me you're about to say it's a step in the right direction.
I wondered how to open here. There was they seem to want to have their cake and eat it opening, but I'm actually, I'm going to fake to the left here. I'm going to go for, I have some sympathy for them. One of the pieces of Canadian jurisprudence that I absolutely adore is the concept of reasonable accommodation. And so a couple of the things that I would come out in favor of the church for here is, if we are going to apply legislation, or we're going to interpret it in a certain way, let's be consistent. And if we're going to change the way that we interpret it, regardless of whether you're a church or whether you're anybody else, let's not just suddenly spring it on people. Let's apply a little bit of common sense. And I would have preferred if the City of Montreal had perhaps gone to these churches and said, hey, look, we think we've been applying the interpretation of this tax exemption improperly. We are going to start applying it, and we're going to start doing that in 90 days or 6 months or even 12 months' time. And given these churches the opportunity to either prepare for it or change their business model. And that's actually the first thing that I would say about this issue. And from that point on, we can lose the nice guy thing and say, absolutely, it's the wrong way round. What we should be doing is providing tax exemption for soup kitchens and anybody that's providing a soup kitchen, and you can darn well pay your tax if you're providing a religious business or a religious service just like everybody else.
But this is a huge gray area, isn't it, Luke? I mean, when we start to, without specific directives or specific boundaries or descriptions, try to decide, bureaucratically or otherwise, who should be exempt from paying tax and who shouldn't. This is Pandora's box wide open.
Yeah, and I'm actually happy to see it open. I've been pushing for clarification on this for a long time. So there are three areas really that this favoritism of religion causes an issue. So one here that is the property tax issue that we're talking about. Then there's the income tax of the churches and the fact that they're able to give charitable tax receipts if you donate to a church. And then thirdly, there are issues where governments are giving money to churches. They're giving tax money. Here in Alberta, for example, we have casino funding. And if you provide a place for religious worship, you can qualify for that funding. The income tax, the federal income tax issue, I believe the exemption is for advancing religion. Well, why are we giving tax exemption for advancing religion? Who said that advancing religion was even a good idea? The Supreme Court of Canada has increasingly been very clear and very specific about this requirement for separation of church and state. We don't have it embedded in our Constitution in the same way that perhaps they do in the U.S., but it has been consistently interpreted by the Supreme Court of Canada, and another ruling out of, forgive me butchering the pronunciation, but out of Saguenay, Quebec, over the praying in City Hall. The Supreme Court of Canada was really, really specific about the fact that the state needs to be agnostic, or not have an opinion on whether religion is a good thing or a bad thing, or favor one religion over all others. Yet, this kind of favoritism is embedded in all aspects of law and legislation. And so, when things like this happen, I welcome the opportunity for us to have a conversation about, is this appropriate in this day and age? Is it fair? Because I sure as heck don't think it is.
You're hearing Luke Fevin. He's a secular rights activist out of the city of Edmonton. Now, Luke, when we look at political initiative, it's not, I don't think, a stretch to suggest that politicians steer clear of what we might call political powder kegs. But this is a day and age, and I'll acknowledge that the economy ebbs and flows, but right now it's a day of deficits in nearly every province. And there are some exceptions, but tax revenue is cherished and it is vociferously pursued by governments. And you have to imagine that governments, either provincially or federally, are investigating those with tax-exempt status and starting to wonder if that should indeed continue to be the case. Now, it's one thing to pull the Lord's Prayer out of a city council meeting, but it's entirely another to open up debate on whether or not churches should continue to enjoy tax-exempt status. Can you see this conversation playing out anywhere in Canada? Is there a politician with the gumption to actually explore this?
I hope they're out there somewhere, but I think it's on the taxpayer. I think when the taxpayer understands the cost of favoring religion inappropriately, it's the taxpayer that needs to stand up. Now, I'm obviously far more familiar with the figures for Alberta on this kind of issue, but knowing that we were going to be talking tonight, I did a last-minute effort to find some context for Vancouver. Now, the numbers I've got are 2 decades old. So let's remember, what I'm just about to say is 2 decades old. But here's what I've got for you. In Greater Vancouver and the 11 surrounding municipalities, 20 years ago, the tax-exempt assessed value of the churches was over $1 billion. Over $1 billion just in Greater Vancouver.
If you're talking 20 years ago, and we look at how those property values have risen, I think it's safe to suggest that might be 1.5 or more.
Yeah. So Listen, these are rough numbers. I'm not trying to tell anybody that this is that you couldn't move the decimal point one way or another here. But I think, based on these numbers, you're talking about $100 million in missing tax revenue, and I think it's down to the taxpayer to say, hey, you know what? Are we going to carry on giving what is essentially a business a free ride here? And yes, I absolutely. I'm going to take a step back here. I am a stone-cold atheist. I'm a secularist. I believe in the separation of church and state. I think we have this ancient privileging of religion. This is one of these examples that I think has to go. But I want to be clear. I'm really appreciative of a lot of work that churches do in the communities that they're in. I have an appreciation for just the beauty of some of those old buildings and what they mean to communities. So whilst I am absolutely calling for clarity on policies, for fairness in the way that we apply these things, and I'm going to give you an example of that in a minute, I go back to reasonable accommodation. Let's manage this change. Let's help the churches move forward. I'm not saying that we should subsidize a church that can't afford to stay alive, but you know what? when that church closes and that congregation isn't there anymore, let's not hammer them with property taxes one day after they've closed. Let's help them actually transition. Now, in terms of the unfairness, here's the thing that I do want to get addressed, and this one's I can talk to because it's more personal for me. We have the casino funding that I was talking about here in Alberta, and the Society of Edmonton Atheists, of which I'm a director of, really punched above its weight a couple of years back. We're not a big society. We're not a wealthy society. Lots of money in religion, not very much money in non-religion. But this year, our team was down. I think we were down helping in the Calgary floods. We were doing city cleanups. We were doing river cleanups. We were donating hair to cancer wigs. We were doing blood drives. We were contributing to libraries. We were doing food bank drives. We really did a really top-notch job. And we applied for casino funding, and we were told that we did not qualify. And yet, if we had been a religious group that provided space for religious prayer or a program of religion, we would have qualified. And that teased me off a little bit.
What, atheism can't be a religion?
Well, funnily enough, it's both sides seem to use that to their advantage or disadvantage as it suits them. The only ruling we've had in Canada, I think, so far was one out of Ontario about 18 months ago that did actually rule that atheism was a creed and did actually deserve legally all the trappings of a religion.
A story out of Montreal we're following. Churches in the eastern Canadian city, they say they're concerned about hosting community groups after they've been hit with bills for municipal taxes for the first time in a long time. In Quebec, as is the case in other provinces, laws exempt churches from paying taxes, but if facilities are vacant for several months, be it for renovations, be it because they're between ministers or whatever the case may be, they're going to be taxed. Our guest is director of the Society of Edmonton Atheists. He's a secular rights activist and also a proponent for public education. Luke Fevin holding the line. Luke, essentially, this boils down to whether or not religious groups should be able to possess property, in other words, assets, without contributing to society in the same way that other asset holders do, correct? Or am I oversimplifying the whole thing?
No, I think you're absolutely right. The gray area is up to this point, we have looked at religion as being a charity, and it isn't. Within religion, and within some religious communities, they do charitable work. Up to this point, what's happened is the whole thing has just been thrown in together, and the religious business end of the deal has been getting a free ride. So I'm all good for honoring and exempting the good work that these communities do. But no, absolutely not. No reason why the business end of their finances and their impact on the community should be any different than anybody else's.
A counselor in Montreal by the name of Peter McQueen told reporters already our churches are in danger. They're having a number of financial problems, and this is a further low blow. He went on to say if we don't do something, you'll see churches closing, churches possibly torn down, certainly converted away from community use. Nobody, Luke, and I say this facetiously, even atheists want to see that happen, do they?
Well, not the nice ones. Look. At the end of the day, if the market of public opinion says that religion is a bad idea, and they're not going, it is not up to the government or the state or anybody else to subsidize a bad idea. So if churches cannot drive attendance and revenue, that's on them, and it's not on anybody else. Again, I couch that comment with the fact that there is some historic and social value that I think we should honor, and I think that we can help cushion the blow in transition, and I think there are some buildings that are worth saving because of either their physical attributes or their historical significance to a community. But that's different than us funding the perpetuation of religion and the worshipping of deities.
So, Luke, people are going to be seeing this story, churches being taxed municipally in Montreal, in other jurisdictions, and we have listeners tuned in British Columbia, in Alberta, and Manitoba right now. In Alberta, especially in Edmonton, your home city and mine, the big debate is, and prompted by an interesting vote out of Red Deer, Alberta, whether or not public and Catholic school boards should amalgamate, whether governments should do everything they can to stop spending double on things like facilities, even things like bus routes. And people of faith are protesting the fact that their religious freedoms, their freedom to gather, their freedom to believe, their freedom to send their children to school where the values that they hold dear are taught and celebrated, that those freedoms are under attack. For people feeling that are listening right now, what would you say to them?
I actually understand why Christians feel like they're under attack, or not them personally, but why their rights are under attack. And here's why. Christians and the Christian religion has had a privilege here over and above every other faith, every other group, for as long as Canada has existed. So that privilege now feels like a right. But in this modern world where we treat everybody equally and where the state treats everybody equally, you no longer get that privilege. Or actually, we do get that privilege. This is the pain that we're going through right now, is the rollback of privilege to equality. And so I do. I completely understand why the Christian community is going, this feels painful. It is. Your privileges are getting rolled back to a place called equality.
Luke, I sure appreciate you making time for us tonight.
Pleasure as always, Ryan.
Listen to CKNW anywhere, anytime at cknw.com or with the CKNW app.